sure about this shirt. I feel like I kind of look like Jack Skellington, but we're getting closer to Halloween, so I guess that's okay. What is up, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for clicking on today's video. So today we have a Mornin Oats. If you're not familiar, this is a series where I just kind of talk about a topic. It could be weight loss related. It could be literally anything that I want to talk about. Tell a story. So that is what we are doing today. Today's story is actually weight loss related. What I wanted to talk about is the absolute worst weight loss advice that I ever got in my life. So before we get into the actual advice, I want to give you guys a little bit of a backstory as to how this kind of came about. So this all happened when I was in like 10th grade, so I was in high school. I think I graduated early, so I think I was about like 14 years old, maybe 13. 13 years old, and I think it was during summer, because I had a lot of free time, I remember that. And what I used to do when I was in high school, which I'm sure a lot of you guys do or did, was I would go to like the mall when I was really bored with no money, had no plans of buying anything, but I was bored, right? So that's what I did. I actually ended up going to the mall, and I went to Best Buy, again, not planning on buying anything, and I was looking through the CDs because this was before that, like, Spotify was out. There was a bunch of streaming sites, right? So you actually had to look at CDs, and I was looking at what had come out recently, and as I was looking through it, I saw an older guy. He was maybe in his 50s. He kind of was like in my same area, and I was like, that's kind of weird. He keeps like getting closer, and I noticed him kind of looking at me, right? And then he finally kind of like tapped me on the shoulder, and he was like, hey, young man. That's what he called me, young man. I kind of wanted to give you some advice. So the first thing I'm thinking is like, stranger danger. I need to get away from this guy because I don't know him, you know what I mean? I'm young. At this time, I was probably about 330 pounds. I wasn't at my heaviest yet, but I was still definitely a pretty big boy, and I used to say like, I remember thinking this in my head, like, the reason I'm so big is because it's harder for people to steal me. So I was like, well, this guy isn't gonna be able to, you know, pick me up and take me away. But I was still like, this is kind of weird. I don't know why this guy is coming up to me. But he ends up, like, we kind of start talking a little bit, like nothing really. He like talks about music for a second. I mean, it was a while ago, right? But then he finally gets up to the point of weight loss and like how he can maybe help me. And he kind of talks about how he knows people, and he like names people. I don't know who they are. I think there are people from like The Biggest Loser or something like that. And I was like, whatever. Like, the guy wasn't necessarily, he didn't look super fit or anything like that. He looked just like a normal guy. So we finally get to the actual advice that he wants to give me. So he tells me that he knows a lot of boxers that use this diet, and they really are able to cut a lot of weight for fights doing this, right? And so he says to me that for every single meal, I should eat about 3 ounces of any meat that you want, right? So that's what it says, 3 ounces of any meat that you want, but you can eat as much as you want after the 3 ounces, but all you have to do is chew it, get all the taste that you want out of it, and then just have a bucket next to you and spit out the food into the bucket and don't eat it. So even at 13, 14 years old, knowing nothing about diet, I remember thinking, that sounds like a terrible idea. And he tries to kind of explain how, one, it'll help with your self-control because you'll have to chew the food and taste it, but you'll have to really work hard to just spit it out and not swallow the food. And then obviously he says the reason it'll help you lose weight is because you're only eating 3 ounces of meat, and all of the other stuff you're just chewing it and spitting out, so you're not getting all the calories from that meat. So by this point, I was pretty much over the conversation, and I was very creeped out by this old dude. So I ended up being like, oh, thank you so much. Like, I really appreciate it. I gotta go. My mom's, you know, she's waiting for me. So I ended up leaving, and needless to say, I never did the diet, but I just remember it's crazy to me, especially now, seeing, like, thinking back on that time when this person, I'm sure they had all of the best intentions, but they just had no idea what they were talking about, and they were trying to give advice to somebody that was obviously struggling with their weight, and that's something that I've noticed still happens, right? And especially, like, the only thing that I will say is it's good that that guy wasn't a weight loss influencer, because he probably would have charged me $20 for that advice. But in all seriousness, like, with diets like that, I'm doubting that many people are doing that, or if that's even a thing, or if it was just some crazy old guy. But with diets like that are very restrictive and have very set guidelines, they do work for a little bit, right? People do things like that and they lose a significant amount of weight pretty quickly. 100%, I'm not gonna deny that. But the issue with things like that is, especially if you don't have a plan for once you're done with that said diet, you just go back to your old eating habits because you haven't learned anything, and that's when you gain the weight back. So there's tons of diets that are similar, not as crazy as chewing food and literally spitting it out, but there's things that are similar, right? Where they're very restrictive in saying you can't have this, you can't have that, you can only have this. And while those diets do work, especially if you are very good at adhering to those diets, you will lose the weight. But the issue with diets like that is that you don't have a plan for after you're done with the diet and people just go back to their old ways, gain all the weight back. So as overused as the saying, you know, it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle change is, I really do believe that that is very important. Now, I'm not saying that you need to plan on like dieting for the rest of your life, like when you find a diet, but you have to have a plan of once you do hit the goal weight, once you do hit, you know, the point that you want to be, what's the plan then? That's so important when you are going on a diet, when you are changing up how you're eating. It's important to have a plan for when you're done, or a plan for when you hit that weight, because eventually, right, you're going to, right, if you actually stick to the diet and you plan to actually get to that goal weight, there's going to be a point where you're like, okay, I'm done losing weight, now what do I do? It's important to think about that fact before you get there, because if you're already there and that's when you start thinking about it, I really do think it's a little too late. Now, you can obviously figure it out from there, but why not think about it before you get there? Because then you'll have such a better plan for when you actually do hit that goal weight and you need to maintain or maybe put on muscle. Okay, but now we're getting off track, but I will say, like, when it comes to diets, one of the things that I've noticed to really look out for is when the diet says you have to avoid certain things. Now, it might say, like, you know, try to avoid eating way too much candy or stuff like that, right? That makes sense. But when it's like, you cannot eat XYZ, you're not allowed, that's when I'd say it's probably not gonna be the best as far as longevity is concerned. Because for a lot of people, myself included, if I tell myself I cannot eat these things, I'm not allowed to eat these things, it's like a kid when you tell them not to touch the hot stove. All they can think about is touching the stupid hot stove, and that's where my mind goes. So instead, if you tell yourself, I should avoid these things, if I wanna have it every once in a while, that's fine. But if you tell yourself, I can't have it, all you think about is how much you want that thing. So with all that being said, I think that's why I'm such a big fan of flexible dieting, especially when it comes to trying to lose weight, because it doesn't put those restrictions on food, right? Not saying good or bad food, it's just this food has a lot more fat and carbs, you know, your cakes and things like that, and this food has a lot more protein, like your chicken breasts and stuff. But you can still have all of the food you want, but you just have to make sure you're under that calorie goal for the day, you're under those macros, and there's no restricting, there's no saying these foods are not allowed to go inside your body. Now, everyone's different. We all have trigger foods that make us, like, we can't help it, and then that, for you personally, you know what to put in those, like, I probably should stay away from this, but it's not some other person putting these restrictions on it for you. And to end the video, I want to give you guys a tool if you are trying to lose weight, or if you're trying to, you know, figure out what flexible dieting is, you know, what you should be doing. I'm going to link a video down below. It's a video that I made, and it'll let you know how to set up your, you know, your diet, how to figure out your TDEE, which is your total daily energy expenditure. I really do think that is the best way to figure out how many calories you should be eating, so you're not eating too many or too little. It's really, really important. So I'll link that video down below, completely free, just to, you know, help you guys out. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for coming to today's video. I really, really appreciate it. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. There was one other thing that I wanted to say. Oh yeah, look how buff I am.
Obey the warning signs, and when there are flashing lights or wigwags, don't attempt to cross until they come to a complete stop.